Joining us from Denver, Colorado is Regina Thompson. She is the co-founder of an effort known as Free the Delegates 2016, talking about delegates heading to the convention, especially delegates supporting Donald Trump, or at least pledged to Donald Trump. Ms. Thompson, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Can we start by talking about the history of this effort? What led you to take this effort, and what specifically are you looking to do?
Well, specifically what we're looking to do is educate the delegates to the National Convention to the fact that they already have the ability within the rules of the convention as they stand and as they have stood since the beginning of the Republican Party other than one convention, that these delegates already have got the ability, the right and the responsibility actually, to cast their votes according to their conscience and their best judgment at the convention, regardless of whether there are mandates from their state party or from their state government telling them that they have to be bound to cast their ballot for a particular candidate.
What particularly in the rules gives them that right?
Well, the language is already there that says that delegates will cast their ballots, that the Secretary of the Convention will faithfully record them as cast, and then if the delegation chair does not present their vote as they've cast it to the Secretary, then the delegates have got the right and the responsibility to take the microphone at that point to say, I contest the way the ballots have been cast for my state. I'm asking for a polling of the delegation. This has been the history of the Republican Party. Over 240 times since the first convention, delegates at the conventions have taken the step to assert their right to have their vote cast and recorded according to their wishes. It has not always been for a presidential nominee. Sometimes it's been over rules, or it's been over platform. Once it was even over whether to adjourn the convention or not. So there's a history within the party and also within the rules, the language that already gives the delegates the ability to cast their vote and have it recorded according to their wishes.
A recent story says that one of your co-founders sent a letter to the Platform Committee, the Rules Committee, saying that they're expecting to bring this up during the platform hearing. What's been the response from the Platform Committee or the Rules Committee to this effort, and do you think a change is going to happen?
Well, it's actually the Rules Committee. What she has done is submitting what she's calling a conscience clause that would be presented first to the Rules Committee for consideration, and it basically takes the salient points out of different parts of the convention rules, and it's just a statement that says the delegates have got the right and the responsibility to cast their vote according to their conscience. The Secretary of the Convention will record their votes as cast, and they will suffer no retribution from their state parties or other political entities for voting as they see fit. So this goes first to the Rules Committee for consideration. If it passes out of the Rules Committee by 50%, 112 people on that committee, if 56 of them do vote to pass it on to the full convention, then it would go to the convention for a full vote. If it does not pass by the 50% margin, but 25% of the committee does vote to send it on to the floor, she can file what's called a minority report, and that takes it now to the full convention, but it has a higher threshold to pass. It would take a 2/3 vote of the full delegation of the convention in order to pass that resolution.
Regina Thompson, as it stands today, do you have the support within the committee itself to pass this?
Well, we're still working on support within the committee. It's a process, and we're a few weeks out. Kendall Unruh has submitted this to her fellow committee members, and she's working to contact them one-on-one. So at the moment, we're not at a 50% threshold, but this is a process, and she's continuing, since she is our committee member from Colorado onto the Rules Committee, she is working on that process. I'm focused on the wider issue of general delegate contact to the convention and letting them know that there is a serious movement afoot to educate them as to their right and their responsibility. So for me, I'm focusing on the other aspect, which the clause that she's introducing will be good to just really solidify in one statement the different parts of the current rules and bring them into one little short paragraph that is really succinct, clear without any doubt what their responsibilities are. What these delegates are facing in many states, well, in a few states, there's actually state law that seeks to tell delegates to private member organizations how they have to cast their votes at these conventions. Now, that's contrary to Supreme Court decisions, two of them in 1975 and 1983, and then a federal court decision in 2007, that make it very clear that in this type of matter that the state government has no authority to interfere with the the inner workings of a private member organization, Republican, Democrat Party, and other other entities. So, but what we've got are some delegates that are fearful. They've got heavy-handed party leaders in their states that they're threatening them if they don't go and cast their ballot according to the primary or the caucus results in their state, and they're assigned candidate there to cast their vote for, that they'll have their credentials pulled, they'll be ostracized within the party. So this is largely my effort to educate every delegate that they already have this right and responsibility, that they're not alone, and that they can cast their ballot on they can cast their vote on the first ballot and every subsequent ballot the way they choose.
We're talking about this effort, Free the Delegates 2016. One of the co-founders, Regina Thompson, joining us to talk about this effort and what might happen at the convention. If you want to ask her questions about it, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8000 for Democrats, and 202-748-8002 for independents. Ms. Thompson, the New York Times did a recent editorial on this effort, and this is part of what they had to say, saying that Free the Delegates is not an effort to find an alternative to Mr. Trump with broad appeal. It's a campaign to ditch him because he's not conservative enough, and it has no apparent plan beyond that. Is that a truthful statement?
Well, it's a bit misstated. We're a coalition of people from across the country in every state, delegates, alternates, and just grassroots people that are from had previously supported various candidates. There's a large contingent of those who supported Senator Cruz. We've got Rubio supporters. We've got one of the national surrogate speakers from the Kasich campaign. So this is a broad coalition. We would not presume to tell the delegates who we want to be the replacement candidate, or in the event that Mr. Trump is not nominated on that first ballot. We are setting the stage. We're opening the door for those delegates to now choose the candidate that they come ready to cast their vote for. Now, we're not in contact with any of the presidential campaigns. We have not talked to them. We're not encouraging any of them. We're not even behind the scenes saying, hey, we think you guys ought to take a good look at this again, because we know that as we get closer to the convention, as the candidates realize that this is a serious effort, that we're likely to succeed, and we are very confident that we will, that already there's one or more of the candidates who were running throughout this last year that are already talking internally with their own campaigns. They're already trying to make a decision as to how they may present themselves at the convention and ask to be the eventual nominee. So, this is a process for the delegates to make that decision, and we're not in a position to say, hey, convention, we think that now you should nominate candidate A and candidate B for vice president. We're just opening the door and laying the groundwork for the delegates to do their work when they get there.
The candidate you spoke of, who is that? Is that Ted Cruz?
Oh, no, I don't know what candidate. I'm not advocating. In fact, internally, none of us even discuss among ourselves who we think the replacement should be, because that's not what our goal is. Our goal is to simply not have Mr. Trump nominated on that first ballot and leave it open for the delegates after that to continue to cast ballots, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 10, whatever the number of ballots it takes in order to come out with a nominee.
So we have calls lined up for you. Callers, just to let you know, there is a bit of a delay with our guest as she is in Colorado. So as soon as you get on the line, go ahead with your question or comment. We'll start with Lenny in Maryland, independent line. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Ms. Thompson. With all due respect, I do not recall this happening the last two presidential conventions, elections, and for some reason, you are circumventing the will of the people, of, for, and by the people. That is what the Constitution is. Just because the establishment of the Republican Party is unhappy with the way the primaries went, there's no need to do so. And mind you, ma'am, if this occurs and another individual comes forward to be president in the Republican convention, you would lose. You would lose a lot of Trump fans.
Well, Lenny, thank you, for your comment. Let me remind you that fully 60% of the Republicans who cast their ballots during the primaries and the caucuses did not cast them for Mr. Trump. So he does not have a majority of the support of those who cast their votes in these primaries and caucuses. This is within the process of the Republican Party. We're not doing anything illegal, nothing shady behind behind closed doors. This is very much out in the open. The reason you did not see this happen after the Romney candidacy nomination and after the McCain nomination, we're not just people who said, we're disappointed. Our candidate wasn't nominated. We're going to go try and disrupt things just because we're disappointed. For most of the people that are involved in this movement, this is very, very fundamental and goes to what we see as the core nature of the candidate. That we do not believe that Mr. Trump, first of all, embodies the Republican Party principles, being a Democrat part of his life, having donated heavily to Democrat candidates over the years. And a lot of other things on policy and temperament and so forth. We do not see him as being the right person for the Republican candidate, and we also don't feel that even if he was nominated that he would be able to win. And so for us, we're operating within the process of the Republican Party, out in the open. We're not hiding what we're doing, and we're inviting delegates to that we know are concerned. We've got hundreds of delegates contacting us over the last couple of weeks saying, thank you for doing this. I'm glad somebody has brought this up. How can I get involved? And let me commit to you that I will vote my conscience at the convention.
From West Virginia on a Republican line, Brian up next. Go ahead.
Hello?
You're on. Go ahead.
This is Brian from West Virginia. The lady brought up the fact that they could vote their conscience earlier in the history of the Republican Party, but they didn't have primaries back then. They just sent delegates to a national convention, and then they ironed everything out. Today we have primaries to get the will of the base. What this lady is doing is going against the will of the base and being anti-democratic. We have spoken. Donald Trump got more votes than anybody in modern times in the primaries, and that's what the people want. You're going against it. You're putting Hillary into the White House. You're going against the base. We don't want these globalist trade policies. We don't want this people coming in from terrorist countries. We voted for Donald Trump, and you should follow the will of the people in your party.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, Brian, I too am concerned about globalist economic policies. I'm concerned about our borders being secure and terrorists coming to our country. We're all concerned about that. We're Americans. We want a safe country for our kids and our grandchildren and for ourselves to live in. We are simply saying, this is the process. We know that we've got concerned delegates, and if we didn't have enough concern across the country from the Republican base, and I'm telling you, this is the Republican base that's behind us. This is not, we're not just fringe radicals. We're very, very concerned Americans. We don't believe that Donald Trump, even if he is nominated, will be able to beat Hillary Clinton. Consider what's going on right now within his campaign, his inability to raise funds. The last government reporting on campaign finance, he reported $1.3 million in his campaign account, as opposed to Hillary Clinton with $42 million on hand. We also know that across the states he has done virtually nothing within the last year to build a campaign infrastructure, which has to be done. You can't win a general election on rallies alone. You have got to have people on the ground. You have to have a plan within these states to campaign and turn out your voters. He has not done that. So when you combine the lack of fundraising, you combine the lack of any planning to actually run a general campaign, and you combine that with the problems with his policies, his temperament, and so forth. For us, all of those things have come together. It's not just disappointment that our candidate, and we all have different opinions on the candidate. It's not just that our candidate didn't prevail. It's that we fundamentally believe that this one is so wrong for the party and for the country that we've taken this historic, unusual step to go down this path.
From New Rochelle, New York, Joseph, go ahead. You're on.
Yes, then I don't understand the purpose of having a primary. The primary winner gets the delegates. So you're doing the same super delegates as they have in the Democratic Party? Or are you really for Hillary? The people have spoken, but you don't want to listen to what the people speak. And maybe that's why Trump is still winning, because you don't understand what's going on. You're too insulated in whatever little country club and political parties you're associated with.
Well, I could only aspire to be a member of a country club. Fully 60% of the people who voted in the primaries and caucuses did not support Donald Trump. He has a plurality, but he does not have a majority. This is simply the process of the Republican Party. Primaries were instituted by, progressive thought that we needed to open it up. And unfortunately, many of our primaries are actually open. It's not just Republicans. And there was a news story out yesterday that analysis shows that most likely 12 million Democrats voted in Republican primaries and caucuses this last spring. That is not the Republican base nominating and speaking for the candidate they choose. That's interference from people outside the party, and it's condoned by state governments. And to our thinking, this is wrong, and that's why we're standing up. That the process has been corrupted by state government meddling, by state parties allowing people who are not registered with the party to come in and help choose a candidate. And we're doing what's right within our own process.
Ms. Thompson, there's a story that says that in order, if you did have a chance for delegates to vote their conscience, you would need 300 plus delegates to revolt, so to speak, in order to make a difference. Do you think you have that amount within the total amount of delegates?
We're very confident by the time we reach the convention that we will have that number and far greater to revolt, yes.
Regina Thompson, Free the Delegates 2016 is our guest, talking about what might play out at the Republican convention in Cleveland in July. Let's hear next from Sherry, Auburndale, Florida. She's on our Democrats line. You're on with our guest. Good morning.
Good morning. Ms. Thompson, obviously what we need to do is vet people before they actually decide that they want to run for president. I heard you mention that Donald Trump has been a Democrat the most of his life. Did the GOP Republican Party not know this before Donald Trump sees the nominee for the GOP candidate for president? And that you're saying that Democrats actually cross party lines to vote this man in. This is not a new thing. While he was on stage flailing around, saying all kinds of nonsense, you guys let him get as far as he got. Now he's the nominee, and you decide to choose that he's been a Democrat most of his life.
Well, thank you for the comments. The reality is that the party structure is there to hold open the forum for candidates who choose to run. We're not there. We don't want someone at the top of the party, whether it's a national party or a state party or our county parties. We don't want one or two people making the choices as to who can put their name into the mix for nomination. It's up to the voters and the members of the party to then vet the candidate. In this instance, you know, the vetting is very public. We know his flaws. We know his history of moving back and forth between the Democrat and Republican Party. We know that he's donated heavily to Democrat candidates. He even tells us, you know, he's proud of the fact that he donates to everyone because that gets him what he wants in his, you know, in his business life and so forth. So he's been very, very open with us about the fact that he's, you know, that he's much of his life. What we're seeing is anger among voters. They don't care about his flaws. I personally care. I think that we've got to have, you know, some discernment in who the President of the United States is. I share the anger of many of these voters. I think that we've got a party in many respects who has lost their way. We feel like we've elected senators and congressmen over the last few years that have told us we're going to go to Washington, we're going to make a difference, we want to bring this country back to a constitutional footing, we want to lower taxes, we want to, you know, lower regulation on business, and we trusted the people that we elected that they were actually going to do what they said they would. So what we're seeing from voters is in a large part, they're just angry. And Mr. Trump is telling them he's going to burn down the House and he's going to, you know, do things differently. I think that most of what he's telling us is rhetoric. Much of what he says he's going to do, he can't do, and a lot of it he won't do. I don't think that he's been honest with the public. And so, you know, we're here, we're the conscience of the party that in many ways we feel has lost their way. We're doing what's allowed within our party structure, and we'll either succeed or we'll fail. And we'll find out when we get to the convention what it's going to be.
Sandra's up next. She's from Alabama on our independent line with Regina Thompson. Go ahead.
Yes, excuse me. I think this lady represents globalist rhinos in the party. I don't think she is totally making everybody so angry. We voted for Donald Trump. That's who we want. And if she continues, and they do this at the convention, there's going to be a lot of people riding Trump on Election Day, and we're going to lose again to Hillary Clinton, who has really got a temper. If she thinks there's a temper, that woman threw a Bible at one of her aides. So I'd rather go with somebody who I know the faults are there and choose him for who he is that will stand up for America than to go for a woman who is a total liar and distrustful and will just take America down. So that's who you rhinos are voting for. It's Hillary Clinton if you don't allow we the people to vote for who we want. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson.
Well, you know, my fellow Republicans in Colorado would laugh at the notion that I'm a rhino. I'm an activist. I'm active in the party, but I'm by no means establishment, and no one in my circles would consider me to be so. I can tell you that my estimation is that the amount of conservatives within the Republican Party and those who are really concerned about the nominee, the amount of those people who will not vote at all, who will undervote, who will write in another candidate, will make the undervote, you know, we've talked about the fact that 3 million or so Republicans didn't vote in 2012 because they wouldn't vote for Mr. Romney. We say it's the evangelical Christians that stayed home. Well, I can tell you that the undervote on this nominee will be so much larger than those 3 million people that we estimated did not vote previously. And the further effect is going to be that it's going to affect down-ticket candidates. That and a down-ticket candidate is basically someone who's on the ballot underneath the lead candidate. And in an election year, the president is the top and everyone else is down-ticket. We're concerned that our U.S. senators, our congressmen, and our state-level politicians are also going to suffer at the ballot box because of Mr. Trump at the head of the ticket. We're not doing this lightly. This is not just a lark and something that we all got together and said, hey, we really don't like this guy, let's find someone different. this really goes to the core of what we believe the Republican Party is, and the quality and character of someone that we need to nominate.
Ms. Thompson, the conservative columnist George Will, there's a story about him today saying that he's planning on leaving the Republican Party, and part of the story, which is picked up on the website PJ Media, says this, says he acknowledged that it's a little too late for the Republican Party to find a replacement for Trump, but had a message for Republican voters, quote, make sure he loses, grit their teeth for 4 years, and win the White House. Are those sentiments you share as far as this approach?
Well, I certainly don't. If I thought that all was lost, then I wouldn't be, sitting here talking to you and doing what I'm doing. I would just, go on to other pursuits and say, woe is me, it's, I can't do anything, but I can do something. And there is time to find another candidate. We've moved both the Democrat and Republican conventions back from late August, early September into mid-July. We've added at least a month to the primary process, to the general election process. There is time. And I can tell you that I would anticipate that if another nominee is selected, that he will probably come from the ranks of the other 15 or 16 who were previously running for this nomination. It will be a candidate who's already prepared, who has had campaign infrastructure in place this last year, who's able to fundraise. I don't see the delegates simply picking someone who was not part of the process previously, just picking somebody out of the blue that's now got to start from zero to raise funds and to put a campaign infrastructure in place. So on that respect, I believe that Mr. Will is wrong, that we do in fact have the time to choose a candidate at the convention and immediately come out of there with the enthusiasm and the ground forces across this country of every person who's supporting us in this effort to get behind that candidate and work on their campaign. So time is of the essence, yes, but it's not lost.
So as far as you're concerned, who would that candidate be? Who would you like to see emerge from that group?
I'm not going to express my personal opinion. I had a candidate I previously supported, but I don't know if he would even accept the nomination or put his name into the hat. So I'm not speculating, but I trust that the delegates at that convention come from the broad spectrum of the Republican Party. You've got those on that are more center-right. You've got those that are more Christian conservative. You've got those that are little L libertarians within the party. So there's really a broad spectrum of delegates there. I have confidence that a candidate is going to rise up that is going to be acceptable to the broad spectrum of Republicans within this party, and that the delegates will do the right thing.
From Alabama, independent line, Lee up next. Hi.
Yeah, this arrogant elitist, that drives me crazy, ignoring the American people. These people, the arrogant elitists in the Republican Party, think back. Her talk about their infrastructure. How did that work for Ford, Dole, Romney, and McCain? Those pukes. It didn't work. And this arrogant elitist, what she is a Clinton fifth columnist. These are Clinton fifth columnists. They're in there to see that Clinton is elected. And she is an arrogant elitist.
Okay, you said that 3 times already, so we'll let our guest respond.
Well, once again, my fellow Republicans would laugh at that notion. I'm not an elitist by any stretch of the imagination, and there's, again, over roughly 60% of the Republicans who did not support this candidate. And campaign infrastructure is important. It's not, the candidate doesn't drive the infrastructure. This is how you win elections. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, or a Green Party. If you don't have people that are willing to go out and make contact to voters and knock on doors and drive voters to the polls, you can't win elections. You cannot campaign simply by holding rallies. It's not effective. You might be able to gin people up to go to a primary and cast ballots, but when you're in a general election, it's a whole different picture.
Our guest is the co-founder of Free the Delegates 2016. FreeTheDelegates2016.com is the website, and you can also tweet them at Free the Delegates. In her previous history, she was the Colorado Grassroots Director for Cruz for President 2016, also past president or current or past president of the Colorado Tea Party Patriots.
I still hold that honor, yes.
Our next call from Claremont, California, Democrats line. Don, hello.
Hello, Pedro and Regina. Those callers from Alabama are putting her right on the spot. Did you see where the president went to Washington to campaign to show he's got all these great skills and he's still super cool? And you see where Trump went to Scotland, where he read the will of the people. And this is where the 1%ers, these globalist elitists, will do anything and everything to hold on to power. That they'll Will is such a bonehead, and this lady coming around here with these pompous, sacrosanct ideas, which are ridiculous. This is strictly a vote to get Hillary in. And anybody that would go to crook that violated, anybody that, a serviceman lost one top secret document, and to see the magnitude of stuff, and to take $145 million for radiation or selling a uranium company to Putin. If this lady isn't indicted, we have no justice system. And I'm ashamed to be talking to you, Regina. Why don't you just admit you're just getting paid to do what you're doing, so you can keep your investments in your overseas manufacturing companies. Thank you so much.
Pedro, if only someone was paying me to do this. I don't know what to say. One of the tragedies of this last election cycle has been that because of Mr. Trump's bullying tactics when he talks to other candidates and when he talks about them and so forth, it's really brought out the ugliness in many voters. We're seeing this across social media. We're seeing it in the states. Here in Colorado, when we elected 34 delegates to the RNC convention that were all on the Cruz slate, we saw very, very angry, threatening rhetoric coming out of Trump supporters. Unfortunately, this has been the effect of a candidate who instills this kind of, feeling within his followers. I get their anger at the government. I share that anger. I could go down issue by issue by issue and tell you all the things that the government has done wrong, and sometimes with the complicit involvement of Republicans. I get it, and I share his anger. But the reality is that I don't believe, and neither do the folks involved in making this happen at the convention, we do not believe that Mr. Trump is honest in his telling us the things that he's going to do. We see him flip-flop on issues consistently, and this is about the integrity of the candidate, not just choosing someone else.
What response have you had either from the RNC or the committee for the convention or the Trump campaign to this effort?
We have not had any direct contact from anyone at the RNC, has not contacted anyone within, that's in leadership within our movement. What we have seen to some extent is within individual states, where there are state party leaders or delegation chairs that are threatening some of their delegates, telling them that if they participate, that they will have their credentials pulled at the convention. And in Arizona, we've got one woman who's being told by her state party chair that if she even speaks about this publicly, and here we are, we're the Republicans are the the party that talks about the Constitution and adherence to it, and we've got a party leader who's telling this woman that she cannot exercise her First Amendment right to speak publicly or to the press before she even gets to the convention and attempts to cast a vote. So that's the kind of pressure that we're seeing in some states, such as, you may be aware, yesterday, on Friday, a lawsuit was filed in the state of Virginia, seeking to nullify a state law that mandates that delegates within the Republican Party and the Democrat Party cast their ballots according to the state law and according to primary results. Well, there's already Supreme Court decisions that tell the state you cannot do that. So a lawsuit was filed on Friday seeking to set that aside and allow the delegates the right to vote their conscience. You know, new evidence comes in, new information comes in about candidates. People who cast a vote in February for Mr. Trump at the first primaries or caucuses, and, you know, with a result that he won X number of delegates in some states, new information has come in. He continues as a candidate to say and do things that voters you know, are not happy with him as a candidate. And so when delegates get to the convention 5 months later, they've got to be able to cast their ballot based upon new information that's come in over the previous months that gives them, you know, that may change their mind as to who's a suitable candidate. This is the process. Conventions are not direct democracy. They're representative, and that's the way the party was started.
We have a little bit of technical difficulty, and we will try to get Regina Thompson back. The Free Delegates 2016 campaign is our guest that she represents. She's a co-founder, talking about delegates at the convention. We'll continue to take calls as we try to reestablish that link. Let's hear from Lansing, Michigan, Republican line. Shelley, apologies that our guest temporarily has left us, but go ahead with your comment or question.
Well, I certainly hope that she can hear me, because I'd like to let her know that this former lifelong Democrat worked for Mitt Romney on Election Day, causing a very big rift between myself and my husband for me to do so. And I'd also like her to know that this former delegate regrets that vote and that work that she put into it, regrets voting for John McCain. And also I'd like to let her know that the people who pay for these primaries in every state and these elections, if they continue with the vein that they're doing and they cause this disruption, and I'm talking about both parties, if they continue to ignore the will of the people, these parties need to be paying for these primaries and the elections. And I'm going to circulate petitions throughout every state in this country so that the people can vote on whether or not to hold these people responsible and make them pay for these primaries and elections, or else not have them. Because if they're going to ignore the will of the people, then they need to be paying for these elections.
That's the last call we will take on this topic. Unfortunately, we've lost the signal for our guest in Denver, Colorado. Our apologies for that.